How is it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Schaefer Stock Market Podcast. This is Josh Selway talking to you guys again, bringing you another weekly edition of the Schaefer Stock Market Podcast. Just a quick rundown of some recent stock market news and other things that we're looking over here at Schaefer's Investment Research. If you could, wherever you are listening, please subscribe, review, anything like that could help the show. I would really appreciate it. Like I said, we're here every single week. And if you like what you are hearing here, go on over to schaefersresearch.com as well, where we have an intraday blog that brings you all kind of news on the options trading front and other things happening across the markets. Now, this week was absolutely insane for earnings. We had earnings from all corners of the market, tons of big names this week. So I'm going to kind of pull most of that together for next week's show and do a more comprehensive view of earnings season so far. Especially next week, we have Apple coming out with earnings next week. So maybe I'll do that show next Thursday to encompass that Apple report. Other big names coming up with earnings. And that is a good segue actually into one of the first stories that I want to talk about. And that involves Alphabet, the Google owner. And I wanted to talk about that because, yes, Alphabet does report earnings next week, but something a little more interesting, at least from my point of view, just happened with Alphabet. Alphabet came out, they released a statement saying that they had achieved a quantum computing milestone, a breakthrough in quantum computing. Now, if you are interested in this quantum computing, there's lots of interesting videos on YouTube. If you haven't read up on this very much, it's sort of a complicated subject, even if you do take the time to try to learn about it and are interested in this kind of stuff. But essentially, quantum computing could have massive implications, much more computing power compared to standard computers. So this would, affect so many different things. And one area where it's particularly interesting is in national defense, because China in particular has been investing billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars into quantum computing and artificial intelligence, all those types of endeavors. But quantum computing in particular, China is seen to be ahead of the U.S. on that front. I believe the U.S. federal budget toward quantum computing is only seen to be around like $2 billion or so. I'm not sure how accurate that figure is, but obviously that would pale, even if it's close, would pale in comparison to the type of money the Chinese government is putting into this type of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see here if China responds with something, a pretty big announcement coming from Google, which obviously here out of the U.S. So that is fascinating. And adding another twist, of course, is you have IBM, who's working on quantum computing themselves. You have IBM coming in saying that Google is actually misrepresenting this data. It's not exactly as clear as they're making it out to be, that a normal computer could do the types of things in a smaller amount of time than Google is leading on, because Google said it would take like 10,000 years or something for a standard computer to do what its quantum computer did. But it's hard to say exactly without going into all the details, and I would just absolutely butcher the details about this if I want to explain what exactly these computers are doing. But right now, we just have IBM pushing back on Google, but Google is staying with its claim for this quantum computing breakthrough. And then, as I said, Alphabet earnings coming up next week, October 28th. That'll be after the close for that earnings release. That's on this upcoming Monday. So going into this event, we actually today, as I record this, Google, ticker GOOGL, going for its best close, going all the way back to April. So the stock's been mostly trending higher in recent weeks, taking a bounce off the 50-day moving average. So good technical action there, good price action for Alphabet stock going into earnings. And we just covered this stock over on schaefersresearch.com, and we noted that options traders have been bullish, betting on more upside, it would seem, there for Alphabet stock going into earnings. So we'll see if the shares can stay hot and keep rising, potentially hit new all-time highs. And speaking of Monday's schedule, I'm very excited for this. I really don't know why, because nothing really happens, but Virgin Galactic, that is Richard Branson's space exploration, space tourism company, is going public on Monday. That finally begins to trade publicly, and the ticker is going to be SPCE. Virgin Galactic is using spacecraft with just 6 seats. It has a waiting list right now of over 600 people waiting to fly with it. They bought tickets for $250,000 per person. So I am very excited to see how this stock performs, how this company performs. Their quarterly updates should be interesting to see what they have to say about the business, what demand is like. I'm not sure exactly how long or how often these space flights are going to take off. And of course, we also need to see how long it is before Jeff Bezos and his Blue Origin space tourism company as well perhaps comes in here and make some kind of move in response to Virgin Galactic here going public. So just a very interesting storyline. I thought that fit off well with talking about quantum computing at the onset as well. A lot of interesting technology here on display. Obviously, people flying into space. That is definitely new territory here for Wall Street. So we'll see how investors view the stock and how it performs going forward. Definitely a name we'll be covering again as soon as possible. Speaking of rockets and billionaires and new technology and all that types of good stuff, let's talk about Tesla, because that stock is absolutely exploding. It jumped from around $250 per share all the way up over $300 per share on Thursday, thanks to the company's strong earnings report. Wall Street was expecting a loss for the quarter. Tesla came in with a profit, and mainly it was driven by the company's gross margins, which were much better than anticipated, and the company is continuing to ship out its cars and grow its customer base. And of course, recently it just started manufacturing the Model 3s over in China. So that's been has been a big boost for the stock as well. And the chart for the past year with Tesla is pretty crazy. Just a year ago, it was trading in the range it's back to now. Today, it's up another 7% at $321. Last year in October, it was trading around $330 per share. So it's trying to make up this big deficit from the past year. In fact, just at back at the end of May, Tesla, in the beginning of June, Tesla fell to as low as $177 per share. So again, it's jumped all the way at $321 per share, over an 80% gain in a matter of months here from Tesla. Just in the past few days, the shares have skyrocketed here thanks to that strong earnings release. And that is always an interesting name to follow, of course, because there's so many different people on both sides of the spectrum, either backing Tesla stock or betting against Tesla stock. And whenever there's a big move like this in Tesla, you're going to see the headlines about how much money Tesla short sellers lose in a day or whatever. However it's most provocative, that's how it's going to be played. I found an article over on CNBC that says short sellers betting against Tesla lost more than $1 billion in a day. So those losses continue to pile up for people who are short Tesla stock. A lot of famous investors have come out against Tesla stock, and short interest overall remains very high on Tesla. So if the stock keeps pushing higher, we'll see here if some of the short positions begin to unravel or how those investors respond. But overall, data from Zacks investments show over 28% of Tesla's float dedicated to short interest. So that's a big number there that we'll continue to monitor going forward, especially if the stock stays this hot. And now I just want to take a moment to point out that it could be a good time to look at the retail sector. We're having a lot of forecasts come in for the holiday season, so this could be a good time before that really becomes a big talking point. Of course, we have Thanksgiving about a month away, and that's when people will really start saying the holiday season, focusing on retailers. But now could be a good time to get ahead of the curve and start really taking into account what these retailers have told us already. A number of forecasts, as I have said, have come out, and a lot of companies have made big moves in the past during the holiday season. So to take note of which companies do that as well, it could be a big deal. But just a few names I wanted to throw out here who have already driven the conversation toward the holiday season based on their surprising forecast, we'll say. And one of those was eBay. It came out, traded at multi-month lows this week. Its quarterly results weren't that bad, but again, it was this forecast for the holiday quarter. eBay forecasted weaker than expected revenue, so that sparked a number of bearish analyst updates on that front after that. Unfortunate forecast there for eBay, but we'll see here how the stock holds up going into the holiday season because, of course, they could just be setting a low bar that they could clear. And then also in e-commerce, we just had Amazon, of course, that its profits were lower than expected as it continues to spend and invest in its business. And its holiday quarter forecast was also softer than expected. So keep those two names in mind. As the holiday season comes in, we start to see numbers. It'll be interesting to see if their numbers actually being quite strong, and that leads to a big performance the next time these companies report, or how that plays out there. And a couple other retailers that I wanted to point to here. The first one is Dick's Sporting Goods, ticker DKS. And I wanted to call out Dick's because Goldman Sachs just upgraded the stock. Most analysts are very bearish on Dick's. Only a couple buy recommendations from that group. But Dick's Sporting Goods also has seen some bullish sentiment out of the options pits here. We had call buy and pick up just in the past few days here on Dick's Sporting Goods. And the other retail stock I want to call out is Skechers, and that is because Skechers just reported earnings, and the option market was pricing in an almost 20% swing for Skechers stock, and the stock ended up only moving a few percentage points a day after earnings. So this is an interesting example of the options market pricing in a huge move for a stock, and yet it barely goes anywhere the day after earnings. And it's rare to see the options market miss like this. Usually that type of volatility being priced into a stock tends to come to fruition at least a little bit. You know, if a 20% move is priced in for Skechers like that, you'd expect to at least see 7, 8, up to 10% type of move, but the stock stayed. Right now, it's basically moved right back to where it was trading before earnings, maybe just a little bit higher. So not a lot of movement out of that stock, despite what options traders were expecting there. So always be careful. Anyone who paid up for those type of premiums before earnings, needing a big move, were burnt pretty badly there with this price action from Skechers. And one final note that I wanted to make here is to keep an eye on the Van Eck Vectors Russia ETF, the RSX. This ETF has made a few big upside moves in 2019 as Russia has come into the global headlines during all the geopolitical situations we've seen unfold this year. And that ETF even today is making another big move to the upside, testing new highs where it is trading now. And we noted that new options positions were opening just this week. A lot of heavy volume on that ETF. We just had, of course, Russia and Turkey coming to an agreement over the Syria situation. So definitely a situation to watch there. And this is an ETF that a lot of traders are focusing on during that situation over there near Syria. And as I said, this ETF, RSX, right now it is on the verge of hitting a new high. But that's it. That's it for this episode of the Schaefer Stock Market Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back next week. As I said, going to bring some more updates on the earnings season, let you guys know what's going on, the biggest moves that we are watching over at Schaefer's Research. Again, go check out the website if you want more information about the stuff we're looking at and more updates on the options trading market. We just actually put up an article of a conversation and an interview with our senior VP of research, Todd Salamone. I would highly recommend checking that out, going over some tips for options traders. That's over on the website. But until next week, I'm out of here. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you guys soon.